email and internet companies. Joining me to discuss the issue is Daniel Castro. He's the Senior IT Policy Analyst for the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, and he joins me by Skype. So, Daniel, these reforms announced by President Obama are aimed at restoring the public trust in the government, but do they restore any trust in the actual companies, the Googles, the Verizons, the mobile service providers?
Yeah, I think the president was trying to do two things, or hopefully he should have been trying to do two things. On the first front, I think he had a very persuasive speech about restoring trust in government and privacy and limits on government surveillance and use of data. But on the second side, it's really about can customers, especially foreign customers, trust U.S. companies? And what we really wanted to see coming out of that today was policy recommendations that would say the U.S. government is going to absolutely have a policy of promoting more security online, more security in commercial products, rather than introducing backdoors and vulnerabilities and other types of weaknesses. And the president didn't even address that issue at all today, so I think that was a major gap.
So I'm wondering, the reputation of U.S. companies doing business overseas damaged by all this NSA stuff. So the reforms announced today, does it do anything to restore that confidence, restore any confidence?
I don't think it does very much. I mean, the problem is over the past 6 months or so, we've seen new revelations every few weeks outlining methods that the NSA has taken to access foreign systems or access data of foreign individuals. And a number of these actions involved introducing weaknesses, exploiting what's known as a zero-day attack, which is when there is a vulnerability out there in a software product or hardware product that the owners of that product don't know about, so only hackers can exploit. And sometimes the government sat on this information and they used it for their own purposes. What that means is they're not really acting in the overall public interest. They're not acting in the commercial interest of U.S. companies and U.S. consumers. And so that means these U.S. companies, when they're trying to go and sell their products abroad, they're having a hard time because foreign competitors are saying, hey, if you buy our product, they don't have backdoors from our government in them. And that's something that is really making it hard to sell.
I'm wondering, is there any way, or what ways can the technology industry work along with the government without hurting customers?
Well, so if the policy of the United States is we want more security, we always want things to be more secure, then that's what we want to see. That's when the U.S. government is working in partnership with the private sector to identify vulnerabilities in an operating system or a mobile device, whatever it is, and fix those vulnerabilities. So if it finds something, it goes to the private sector and says, this is how you fix it. If it comes up with a new algorithm to secure data, it shares that with the private sector. It doesn't keep it just for itself. And what it especially shouldn't be doing is introducing weaknesses so that it can hack into these systems. But when it does that, the problem is other hackers can sometimes get in as well.
But isn't the whole purpose of the program giving the government the ability to spy on consumers who are emailing and making phone calls?
Well, if you look at the speech, historically it's actually been called signal intelligence, which means not only knowing what people are saying, but also when they're saying things, how they're saying things, and who they're communicating to. And so the president was, I think, very, very right to defend the metadata program. That's very useful information, and that's that program is all about collecting patterns of activity and extracting and analyzing these patterns and learning something from that. So you can do things like that where you don't reveal private information, you don't necessarily hack into systems, but you use intelligence about how signals are flowing, who they're flowing to, and you use that for your intelligence operations. Now, certainly, the government's still going to spy, they're still going to break into some systems, but they should do. I mean, we've known for a long time that the IT revolution has meant people have more security. We can have better encryption now than we've ever had in the past, and that's going to make it more difficult to spy.
So let's talk about that bulk data collection, specifically when it comes to phones. I mean, the government, he's saying that the government shouldn't hold on to the data. So whose responsibility is it going to be? Does government want to bear that responsibility and bear that cost?
Yeah, that was an interesting proposal he has out there because he didn't say specifically who would have it. He did say that he doesn't think the government should have it anymore, which presumably means it's going to either be the company that originally has it, the telephone company, that they'll be required to keep this data, and they'll be required to create systems to allow the intelligence agencies to then go and analyze that data, or they're going to say there needs to be some kind of new third party who the telephone companies will be required to turn that information over to and then do the same. I think a lot of that's window dressing. I mean, the same data is there. It's just a question of who's paying for the servers on which the data is stored. The real question is, what are the limitations on use? And that's what I think, for those that are interested in reform in this area should be focusing on. What are the limits on use of that metadata? And is the government able to use it in meaningful ways?
And I guess the question, though, is about the cost. If these companies now have to hold on to all of this data so that the government can have access to, are they willing to bear that out?
Well, at the end of the day, I think the government will have to foot that bill. Historically, that's what they've done in other cases where they've required telephone companies or other companies to take on some kind of law enforcement activity on their behalf. This is something that might need congressional approval. It will certainly need budget authority, and so that's something that will have to be explored as this recommendation plays out.
Now, I know he mentioned the bulk data collection, but he didn't mention anything about encryption, right? So to what extent does email remain vulnerable?
Well, that's again, it's really one of these central questions. When can government get access to private data? If you look at the statements that he made and the memorandum coming out of the White House today, it does say there are going to be limits on when private data is accessed, both of citizens and of foreign individuals. That said, a lot of people are saying, we have a Fourth Amendment, and that should be the standard. It shouldn't be anything else. There shouldn't be, other lower standards, which is what's been implied in these current statements. So again, there's just this level of uncertainty. And I think, when you look at the international stage, other countries, other companies in other countries especially, are going to say, if you use our email service, for example, maybe your data is more secure because we're not saying that we're going in there and accessing it. And we really want to have common standards. It's not that the government shouldn't go in and get the information when they suspect that there's terrorist activity. It's that I think collectively we can agree with most of our allies that there are clear conditions on which that should happen and that they should be the same in most countries.
Thank you. Daniel Castro, Senior IT Policy Analyst for the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. I'm Conway Gittins, and this is Reuters.